The next topic we will be handling is on barriers to communication. We spoke of principles to make communication effective, and there can be so many barriers which sees to it that the effectiveness of communication is reduced. And the first barrier that I would like to speak about is noise. Noise, the term when you hear, the first thing that comes to your mind is a loud voice, is a noise that a factory unit is making. It's a voice that the cars going through the road or vehicles going through the roads are making. But noise in the communication context is different. When I say noise, it is any interference, any obstacle or any barrier that is making the communication ineffective. When I say noise, I refer to any interference that is happening in communication which sees to it that the communication ends up being ineffective. So interference that occurs in a signal and prevents you from hearing sounds properly, or machines in factories, public speaking, distortion, technical problems, etc. can be examples. Or the sender may resort to ambiguous or confusing symbols, which means that the receiver is not receiving it properly. Or you might even have the receiver with prejudices. So, which means that what will happen is, at the end of the day, the sender of the message had some intention in his mind, but because of the prejudice of the receiver, he receives it in a different format. So, the prejudice of the receiver, even that works as a noise. So, when I say noise, it is not just about the voice that I am speaking, but any interference that will happen, which will lead to it that the communication is being ineffective. Lack of planning, another problem, very important. Why? Because this is not a casual thing, communication. You might have a lot of information in your mind. You might have learned a lot of things. But before you go into speak, you have to put it on a plan. You have to give a structure about it. This is what I'm going to start with. This is what I'll continue. These are the contents that I'll include in my speaking, and these are the contents which I'll exclude out of my speaking. There has to be a proper plan on how you are going to communicate. Else, it becomes very ineffective. You will end up confusing the audience. You will end up speaking so many information which is not necessary. You will end up speaking so many information, missing so many information which was necessary. So unfortunately, many people take it lightly. Preparation level will go only to reference. They'll just read through whatever content they want to speak. But then they'll not put a structure, which makes it absolutely ineffective. And that's why lack of planning is a very important barrier which has to be gotten rid of in communication. Semantic problems, when you say semantic problems, it's always associated with languages. So the problem arising from expression or transmission of meaning in communication are called semantic problems. Meanings in mind of the sender and receiver need not be the same. Clarity, simplicity, and brevity can only resolve this. So the problem is, you as a sender have something, an idea in your mind, you are putting it into some form, some channel, you are using some kind of a language, verbal or non-verbal, and you are communicating it to the receiver. But the receiver, because of his lack of ability to interpret that language, receives it in a different form. There is a difference between what is in the sender's mind and what is there in the receiver's mind. And that is what will lead to what is called your semantic problem of communication. So the only way that you can get through is you need to have clarity, you need to have simplicity, and you need to have brevity. You need to be specific also about it. Only this can resolve the problem of semantic. Cultural barriers, this happens very often. This used to be the thing of the past. Now slowly it's changing. There is a problem particularly today because now we have to operate in international environment. You are facing people in different cultures, belonging to different cultures. You don't know. Take for example, a bow in Japan would be pretty much same as a firm handshake in US. That's how they greet. Two different cultures, they greet differently. And because you don't know the differences in cultures, it acts as a barrier also. In today's world of globalization, this is a big problem that is being faced by any organization. So some category of words, phrases, symbols, actions and colors means different to different cultures. So even if you're talking about marketing a product of yours, you are profiling or you are naming the product. If you are looking at in an international context, you will have to address the cultural issues related to it. What does this word mean in another part of the world? That problem has to be solved. Else you might take a boomerang in some markets that you're targeting. Wrong assumptions. Very often we would have assumptions without caring to seek clarification. We believe that this is how this thing is. We don't care to clarify that. We don't care to look at what is it that the sender has in mind. And because of that wrong assumption, we often end up in prejudices or set minds which you don't want to change. And that is another major barrier in communication. Socio Psychological barriers, another. You have got different levels and different status in the society, different roles in the society, and you have got different attitudes, opinions, place in society, and status consciousness arising from one's position in the society. According to the position in the society, his attitude would be different, his opinions would be different, his place in the society would be different, and that will often work as an obstacle in communication when it comes to speaking with a person who is in a lesser level in the organization or lesser role in the organization. Emotions, both encoding and decoding of the messages are influenced by our emotion. What is the frame of mind that we are in? Even if we are receiving a very good news that we have been expecting, the frame of mind that we are in while receiving this message will change the way you interpret the message. And that is why emotions plays a role. Similar is in the case of when you are sending out a message. While you encode this, the frame of mind, if you are irritated with something, the way you put it will be totally different. And the ultimate result that you are going to get from the sender or from the receiver would be different from what you expected, because you were at a different state of emotion while you are encoding the message. Another problem is selective perception. This happens very often. When I listen to an information or when I read through an information, there might be things which interest me. There might be things which I don't like. There is often a possibility that I'll select only those things which I perceive should be right. And that works as a barrier. You are not ending up with full information. You are sticking to your state of mind because you are perceiving it selectively. So receivers selectively see and hear upon their needs, backgrounds, motivations, experience and other personal characteristics. And that is why selective perception is a barrier. Filtering, again, as it goes down the level, or say, you will take only what is there, what is it that you need. You forget about what you don't like. So filtering means that sender of a message manipulates information in such a way that it will be seen favorably by the receiver. As I told you in a previous example, when you have a manager working towards the end of the month, he has got an order from the HR department regarding a change in the incentive structure. He knows that there is a target which he needs to achieve within 2 or 3 days, and he knows that if he communicates this way to his subordinate, he might end up not achieving his target. And because of that, he filters the information and passes it to the subordinate. And because of this filtering, the communication is becoming as a barrier to communication. Information overload. There is always a chance that you end up with too many information. You need to have a solution to a specific problem. So in a intention to support your subordinate or support whichever receiver that you are sending to, you are giving him all kinds of information related to the aspect wherein he has to make a decision. And because of the information overload, he is confused. He doesn't know the priorities. He gets less precise, or he doesn't know what is expected out of him. And that also works as a barrier at times. It may stifle, bore and frustrate the recipient. When people are bogged down with information, they are likely to make errors. You have got so many information coming in. So you start to filter. You will get bored. You have too much of information in hand. You will lose specificity. You will lose clarity. And because of all this, communication becomes ineffective. It may lead to selectivity also, as I told you. Poor retention, particularly when you are talking about, say, verbal communication, oral communication. When you are speaking, you might retain many things, but you might lose out so many things. And because of that, it works as a barrier to communication. People are likely to forget message reaching them. You have been hearing to them for a whole day, to a particular speaker. But then end of the day, you retain only a few things. You forget a lot of important things. And because of that, the communication has become ineffective. So poor attention is another major problem. Poor listening, as I told you, you must understand not just the words, you must go beyond the words. You must think about what is the emotion or what is the state of mind under which this particular speaker is speaking to you. So you must have the understanding beyond just words. And if that is not there, the communication again will be ineffective. You will not understand the real sense of purpose behind this. So too many people are interested in talking again. Poor listening accounts for incomplete information and also poor retention. Hence it works as a barrier. Goal conflicts. You have different departments in the organization, and each department has its individual goals. You take an example of, say, a finance department. A finance department, the major objective would always be to see that you're cutting the cost to the maximum. While in your sales department will try to increase your sales promotion activities and increase the quality of the product so that they are the best in the market, and because of that they are getting a lot of sales. So there is always a conflict of interest between the different departments in the same organization, and that is what will lead to what is called goal conflicts. So you are going in off directions. Organization has a goal in all, has got a goal in common, but then different departments are working for different goals, and because of that, again, your organization might end up losing. That is another major barrier that is happening in communication. So communication should serve as a conflict reduction exercise. You need to sit together, the finance head, the sales head, the operations head, the HR head. These people need to sit together and realize or speak, communicate, and then end up at a solution. They should say that this is our collective goal. They should see to it that there is no conflict of interest between departments working under the same organization, because ultimately their requirement is the prosperity of the organization. So communication should work as a tool to resolve this goal conflicts. Offensive style of communication. This is related to styles of communication that different people follow. Different people would have different styles of communication. Somebody might, he or she might not indent anything in his mind, but he has a specific style wherein he tends to be a bit offensive, and because of that you will be misinterpreted, and because of that the communication becomes ineffective. If a manager sends a message in such a way that the workers or junior becomes defensive, their relations get strained and communication may suffer. You will not receive any feedback if the subordinate officer is becoming the defensive. He will try to defend whatever is coming towards him. He will not speak out. So what is happening? Ultimately the desirable action is not coming, and hence your communication is not effective. Insufficient period for adjustment, another major problem. People respond to change in different ways. They take their own time to adjust to any news or proposal for change, and insufficient period that you have for adjustments leads to what is called reluctance to change, and that is another major barrier that comes in communication. all on a sudden you are telling somebody that we are going to make a change. Next week onwards, this is the kind of change that our organization is going to face. So you don't have enough time to plan or think on it and decide on why did the management go for this decision. And that will also lead as a barrier. Loss by transmission. Communication often gets diluted when messages pass on from one person to another. You can try this exercise if you are in a group. The exercise will work like this. There will be a first person sitting there. He will say a sentence to a second person in his ears. In the same way, the second person will pass this to the third person. And you go up to say 7 or 10 people. And then they'll stand together. The first person and the 10th person will come in, and the 10th person will say what the information was. And they look at what the first person had in mind. 9 out of 10 times it would be different. There is always a chance that it would be totally different. So that is what you call loss by transmission. So the question is, how do you overcome the barriers? As we discussed the barriers, there can be so many solutions, but in general there can be so many solutions to overcome the barriers that comes up in communication. Number one, it should start from inside a person. I should be objective oriented. I should have a target. I should be target oriented. So inside me, my objective of communication should be to see that I am getting a desirable action. Okay. So it should change from the inside of a person. At organizational level, top management should ensure free and flawless communication. They should not be authoritative. They should give enough freedom for their employees, or right for their employees to speak their problems, to give in their suggestions. Openness and communication should come up in any management. Then, listed are some of the ways to overcome communication barriers. Let's look at each of them one by one. Overcoming perceptual barriers. People having wrong and negative perception is a major issue. There are people who comes up with set perceptions in their mind. So those people who have a negative perception is a major issue. So we usually are not conscious of our flaws. So as we discussed in the first slide, it should start from inside of us. We should first identify what are our flaws. Only then can we think about making the communication effective. So understand or overcome the perceptual barriers. Understand our flaws and understand the reality, and then speak. Effective listening is another important step that you need to see that you are overcoming barriers. Because as we have been discussing, listening is so very important. You need to understand what the sender has in his mind. You also need to understand what the receiver has in his mind. Only then you can solve a problem. So listening should not be identified with submissiveness and subordination. It is not that you are submissive or submitting to somebody. You are going down under somebody. You are trying to make the communication effective. You are striving for the objective that you want to achieve. And that is what listening does. So listening is a very important method to see that you are overcoming the barriers. Create a synergic environment. Create healthy and congenial environment while communicating with others. You should make the platform set. You should have a platform wherein the receiver, the sender, everybody in the system are free to speak. So you need to create a healthy and congenial environment wherein everybody are comfortable. Only then can you have effective communication happening there. Convey emotional content of the message. You need to, as I was talking about listening, you need to go beyond just the words. You need to go into the emotions or feelings that is behind the communication. So you need to convey the emotional content. Sender should consider the emotional reaction of the receiver, whether the message will be interpreted positive or negative. There are different types of communication which needs to be passed in an organization. Some might be negative. Employee of yours would have applied for a promotion. He has been a good performing person, but then due to some reason you are not able to promote him. So you cannot just give a straight letter to him because you need to consider his emotions. he might end up leaving the organization as such. So in such cases, you need to understand what his emotions are, and then based on that, you'll have to react. Use the appropriate language. Understand the ability of the receiver. Understand on who you are talking with. Understand the context of the message. Understand the content of the message, and based on that, use the right language. Language should be designed according to the mental wavelength of the audience also, or the receiver also. Only based on that, you should design the language. Use the proper channel. For negotiation, persuasion, brainstorming, etc., you need to have face-to-face communication. For conveying information to large number of illiterate and semi-illiterate workers, oral and visual communication is more effective. In case of formal relations, written communication should be followed. So what are we taking into consideration here? Number one, who is your receiver? What is his capabilities? What is his ability? Number two, you are considering the context. You are considering under what context am I sending this. Number three, you are looking at the purpose of your communication. You are looking at all these things and deciding on the channel that you need to use for communication. Ensure two-way communication. We have been saying this, which we'll have to keep saying to ensure that communication is effective. The flow of communication should flow in all directions, not just two-way, not just upward and downward. It should be diagonal, it should be lateral. Only then you can see that communication will become effective. So make best use of body language. A stat says that more than 55% of the communication takes place through body language. Even if I am keeping on speaking, what speaks to you more would be my body language. The way my facial expression, the way I move my hands, all these things are giving you ideas. So 55%, I'm saying that the words are playing only 45%. Maybe there are some other things. So less than 45% effect for words, 55% of communication is taking place through body language. So that is why body language is important. You need to know how you are conveying, how your body language is, and you have to act accordingly.